What happens when the rain turns unstoppable? How did entire villages vanish in a matter of minutes? Could this disaster have been predicted or prevented? What hidden forces turned Indonesia's landscape into a danger zone? And most urgently, could this happen again, even worse? Indonesia's tropical climate, heavy monsoon rains, and mountainous geography make it highly vulnerable to severe flooding and landslides. And the story of this disaster begins with the land itself. Stretching across thousands of islands along the equator, Indonesia is built on steep volcanic ridges, deep valleys, and river systems that respond violently to sudden bursts of intense rain. Towering mountains collect moisture-heavy clouds that release enormous downpours with little warning. When the monsoon season arrives each year, the atmosphere fills with warm ocean moisture that can become catastrophic once it condenses into concentrated storms. The terrain that looks breathtaking in calm weather can, during the monsoon, turn into an intricate network of uncontrolled water channels rushing downhill. Villages built along riverbanks or slopes because flat land is scarcely indirectly in the path of nature's power. Even before this disaster began, the mountains were saturated from earlier rains, the soil already holding more water than it could bear. When the sky darkened and the rain intensified, the balance between land and water collapsed, setting in motion a chain of events no community could escape. The rainfall began like any typical monsoon evening, but within hours it became clear that this was something far more dangerous. Clouds thickened until daylight vanished, and the sound of rainfall grew so loud it drowned out all other noise. Water poured off the mountainsides in sheets, not streams, carving new paths through forests and villages alike. Upstream, hidden behind ridges, natural dams of soil and debris gave way after becoming waterlogged. When they collapsed, massive walls of water thundered downward with terrifying speed. People heard deep rumbles that felt like the earth itself was shifting, followed by sudden blasts of wind pushed ahead of the oncoming torrents. Houses were uprooted, roads disappeared beneath brown surging water, and trees snapped like matchsticks. In some villages, the flood rose from ankle-deep to waist-deep in minutes. Families scrambled to rooftops. Some were swept away before they understood what was happening, and cries for help were swallowed by the roaring flood. Flash floods offer almost no chance of escape, and that night, nature gave none. Lightning illuminated collapsed bridges, overturned cars, and schools buried under mud. By dawn, when the rain finally weakened, survivors emerged to find landscapes they no longer recognized. Thousands were displaced as critical infrastructure collapsed, turning the rescue mission into a race against time. With bridges snapped and roads washed away, emergency teams were unable to reach many of the worst-hit areas. Phone networks went down, electricity lines lay tangled in mud, and entire districts were cut off from the outside world. Evacuation centers overflowed within hours, filled with parents holding children, elderly residents in shock, and families who had lost everything in a single night. There was too little clean water, too few medical supplies, and too much need. Doctors treated injuries caused by collapsing homes and swift currents. Volunteers tried clearing roads but were forced to stop each time fresh landslides rumbled down unstable slopes. Many villages could only be reached by boat or helicopter, and even those flights were limited by low clouds and constant rainfall. In shelters, children cried from fear and hunger. Parents tried to comfort them despite their own grief, and long lines formed for food that sometimes never arrived due to blocked roads. The full scale of the disaster overwhelmed local authorities. Even well-trained disaster teams struggled to manage the chaos as rain continued to threaten new collapses. And still, amid the destruction, people worked together sharing blankets, comforting strangers, and refusing to give up hope. Behind the scenes of this catastrophe lay deeper, environmental stresses that had built up over decades. Deforestation had stripped many mountain slopes of the trees that once held soil firmly in place. When forests fall, the land loses its natural armor. Rain hits exposed soil directly, eroding it quickly, making slopes fragile and rivers muddy. Rapid urban expansion worsened the situation, narrowing rivers with construction and replacing absorbent land with concrete that offered no path for water to escape. Drains clogged with waste overflowed instantly when the rain intensified. Shallow riverbeds filled over years with sediment from upstream erosion could no longer contain sudden surges, making floods faster and more violent. Climate change added another layer of danger. Warmer oceans fed storms with more moisture. Monsoon patterns shifted unpredictably, and rainfall intensity increased far beyond historical norms. None of these factors alone would have created a catastrophe of this scale, but together they formed a perfect storm. When the rain struck, the land simply could not cope. Hills collapsed, rivers exploded outward, and cities drowned. The tragedy was not only a natural disaster, but also a reminder of the delicate balance between human activity and the environment. Every tree cut, every river narrowed, every poorly managed development had quietly weakened the landscape long before the first drop of rain fell. And yet, amid all this devastation, the people showed extraordinary resilience. As official rescue teams struggled to reach remote areas, Neighbors became rescuers, risking their lives to pull others from rising waters. Fishermen used their boats to navigate through flooded streets, saving families trapped on rooftops. Young men formed human chains in the current to help children, and the elderly crossed to safer ground. Villagers who lost their homes still cooked meals for others. Volunteers arrived from nearby regions with food, blankets, and medicine, sometimes walking hours through mud because roads were gone. Mosques, schools, and community halls became shelters, glowing with candlelight and filled with people determined to survive together. Children huddled together, listening to stories told by teachers trying to calm their fears. Mothers shared food even when they had barely enough for their own families. The unity that emerged in the days after the flood became the heartbeat of recovery. It was not just physical resilience but emotional strength, people comforting one another, grieving together, planning how to rebuild even as they stood on the ruins of their homes. The disaster had taken everything from them, yet it had also revealed a powerful truth. The human spirit, when tested, rises. It rises in compassion, in courage, in the willingness to fight for others, even when one's own world has collapsed. This documentary is ultimately a story of nature's force, human vulnerability, and the unbreakable strength of community. It is a story of a land shaped by mountains and storms, a people shaped by resilience and unity, and a tragedy that exposed both the fragility and the courage within Indonesia's heart.